Okay, I'm really glad to be here and to have the chance to present my research and its impact at the PRG Talk 2023. And the main goal of my research has been to investigate how painting and visual sources influence European silent films. To do that, I've had to define an intermediate approach which put in dialogue the two key terms of my analysis. And in particular, my research aims to offer an original perspective to rethink European silent cinema that emphasizes its visual quality and its relationship with the visual arts and culture. This is based on three main research questions, which are, firstly, does painting and more generally visual sources influence European silent films? And if so, what types of interactions exist between cinema and painting? And more generally, can cinema painting intermediality be extended beyond film studies to understand more general social and cultural trends? And so, before moving forward, we have to define a key concept, which is, what is cinema painting intermediality? And so, when we are talking about intermediality, we mean the dialogue between two media. In my case, cinema and paintings. And this could be at many levels. A film can share with a painting or a number of paintings more general stylistic and formal features. This is the case, for example, of the painted backgrounds in Venus, Das Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and their link with German expressionist paintings, such as Kirchner works, the riverbank at Elizabeth, for example. But we may witness also a more direct reference to a specific painting or a number of specific paintings. And so, elaborating on the idea of cinema painting intermediality, I identified three main levels of analysis, which are, firstly, a way to rethink the cinema of attractions. Secondly, it could be extended to the broader study of history and theory of cinema. And thirdly, it could be seen as a methodological approach to rethink cinema as a cultural phenomenon. Let's start from the cinema of attractions. So this was theorized by Gunning and Gondreau in the 1980s as a challenge to the previously well-established understanding of early films as a primitive form of cinema in the development of film language and art. Gunning and Gondreau, instead, defend the originality of early films as they were part of the entertaining system of the 19th century. Now, elaborating on Gunning and Gondreau idea of the cinema of attractions, I've tried to emphasize its visual quality instead of its spectacular one. And this is because, although early films are undeniably a part of the 19th century spectacular system, I believe that they are also part of the popular culture and popular visual culture of the time. And we may identify the influence of popular visual culture of the time if we compare, for example, The Arrival of the Train by Louis Lumière and Train in the Snow by Claude Monet. In fact, we may see at a compositional level that they both share a diagonal perspective. But what concerns us the most is that they both picture a train which was, for that time, one of the most important icons of modernity. However, the impact of cinema painting intermediality could be extended beyond the study of the cinema of attractions and can help us to understand film history and theory in its entirety. For example, if we look at Enrico Guazzoni Quo Vadis, this is an Italian peplum film from the 1910s and the free adaptation of a very well-known novel of the time, which was Quo Vadis by Sienkiewicz. So, in one of the key scenes of the film, the persecution of the Christian martyrs, we may see how the filmic configuration seems to be inspired by Jerome, the Christian martyr's last prayer. And this is because Enrico Guazzoni, who had a background in art history, looked at a very well-known painting to stage a key film scene and an iconic place in ancient Rome, the Colosseum. But this was not a faithful reproduction of ancient Rome, but a fictionalization based on a classicist French painting. And this was because the nascent Italian cinema was trying to compete with Hollywood high-budget productions by releasing onto the foreign market an immediately recognizable reproduction of the Italian past. However, this raises also cultural and interpretative issues in terms of references and representational strategies. And Quo Vadis is not an isolated case. In fact, we may see how the cultural implications of cinema painting intermediality could be extended to many other film cases. And for example, in Les Voyages dans la Lune by Georges Méliès, we may see how the gigantic cannon, which sent the film astronauts onto the moon, is freely inspired by an illustration of Verne's Autour de la Lune, which is one of its literary models. And looking at the way Méliès reused the gigantic cannon may help us also to understand the way he engaged some social and cultural issues of his time. This is because the anti-militarist message existing in the original literary model, in the way the canon is represented, then was included also in Méliès' film. And this helps us also to understand how a literary model and a film engage cultural issues such as the imperialist propaganda in 19th century France. So, to conclude, one of the most important impacts of my research has been to identify an intermediate approach that defines an original perspective to look at cinema in its entirety. Emphasize the visual quality of films and the relationship with visual arts and culture. And lastly, outline broader connections with cultural and social phenomena, putting in dialogue film theory and history with other disciplines. And thank you for your attention.